Hello, welcome to Yoga with Elia. Today we'll be looking at two versions of shoulder stand, Sarvangasana, one with props, one without. You will need a yoga mat, about 4 to 5 yoga blankets, a yoga strap, and either a yoga block or a yoga bolster. Now first we need to set up the mat. You will place your mat, the edge of your mat, about 1 foot away from the wall. And then you're going to sit on the mat and put your heels against the wall with your legs straight and mark where your sitting bones are on the mat. And you can mark that using the belt just right off the side of the mat. Then you're going to grab your first blanket and you're going to fold it or unfold it so that it's roughly half the size of your yoga mat. And you're going to place it down on the mat, make sure that the edges of the blanket are right in line to the edges of the mat. Smooth the blanket out so everything is neat and tidy. The other blankets are going to be half of that shape. And you're going to place the first one down, making sure that the edge of that first blanket is in line to where your sitting bones were marked. And then you're going to place the rest of your blankets right on top of the first one. Again, making sure that the edges of those blankets are all in line to one another. Then you're going to place your bolster on the other end of the blanket stack. And then sitting on the blankets, grab your belt and make sure that you have a loop made with the belt. You're going to place the loop on your arms just above the elbows and then press out just to see how wide your belt is. Now we want to make sure that the elbows do not go wider than the width of your shoulders. So make incremental adjustments to the strap so that your arms are exactly parallel to one another. Once you confirm the right measurement of the belt, you're going to keep the belt over one arm, sitting on the bolster. You're going to slowly roll yourself back to the blankets. And first you need to make sure that the top of your shoulders are about 1 to 2 inches away from the edge of the blankets. Pressing your arms into the bolster, you're going to lift your pelvis and your legs up overhead, bringing your feet to the floor. If it's too challenging to bring your feet to the floor, if your lower back feels uncomfortable, place your feet on the wall. And then again, notice with your fingertips where the top of your shoulders are with respect to the edge of the blankets, making sure that they're right on the edge. Then you're going to take the other end of the strap, place it around the other arm, interlace your fingers and rock side to side several times, just so you can start to narrow your shoulders closer to each other. Once you have that, place your palms flat against your back, and then leaning your body into the hands, lift your legs up nice and straight. It's important that your fingertips are facing straight up towards the ceiling the entire time. And what's often unsaid or unnoticed when we do this posture in public classes is where the weight should be placed when you're in shoulder stand. And so it's important to know that even though the name shoulder stand might suggest that we actually should stand on the shoulders, this is actually incorrect translation, because if we place all of our body weight right on the shoulders, due to the fact that the shoulders are in the same exact location as the base of your neck, this can put a lot of stress on your neck. And if you can tell, your neck is already under a lot of flexion in this posture. So the correct idea is to let the body lean back into the arms and hands so that the majority of your body weight actually lands closer to the elbows, somewhere in the mid-upper arm to lower upper arm, elbows. And every once in a while you can adjust your hands by trying to place them closer and closer to your shoulder blades. Make sure that your breathing stays nice and consistent the whole time. You don't have to try to necessarily breathe as deeply as possible, but just see to it that your exhales are complete. For safety, other than the fact that you want most of your body weight to be landing towards the elbows, you want to make sure that the plumb line of your face, where the tip of your nose is, the entire time you're in the posture stays in line with the plumb line of your body. Because your neck is already under so much flexion, it is very risky to turn your head or create any other movement of the head. So no matter what happens, do not turn your head to the side while you're in this pose. Now, the effect of being on blankets, if you have blankets, and you can always use and swap out a couple of big bath towels, but the effect of using a prop is that even though it places you in shoulder stand and your neck still is placed into a lot of flexion, it actually alleviates an excessive amount of flexion that would otherwise be the case if you were flat on the mat. Because your entire body, other than your head, is elevated since you're on that blanket stack, your head is technically below the rest of the body, which means that it's not under as much flexion as its propless variation. Squeeze your legs tight together and try to extend up through your heels. This is the kind of pose that it is very interesting to connect to the sense of meditation, the sense of internal poise and equanimity. Now, if you don't have any pathologies in the neck, any injuries, any chronic conditions in the neck, this can be a very, very useful pose. And if your neck does feel tight, then of course you can stack yourself up on higher blankets so that your neck is placed under less flexion. But one of the greatest benefits of this pose is that it really helps to trigger a calming response in the body, and which, to put it neurologically, is the parasympathetic response. When we're upside down and we have the head below the rest of the body, the head below the heart, this actually starts to reduce our blood pressure, our heart rate, and it does instill a sense of not just external restfulness, but internal restfulness. So this pose can be done just a la carte, by itself, at the end of the day, and especially great before bed. So it's been about 5 minutes since we've been in the pose. To come out, you will start to release your hands, drop your pelvis back towards the bolster and bring your feet overhead, and then we'll come into plow pose. So whether your feet are on the floor or on the wall, take the belt off of your arms, reinterlace your fingers and clasp your hands. Keep your shoulders nice and narrow, again, by rocking side to side a couple times. And wherever your feet are, on the floor or on the wall, make sure that your legs are straight. And one way to ensure that is to actually drive your feet straight down into the floor. You can imagine if there was a scale underneath your feet that you were attempting to push more weight and register more weight in. Plow pose and shoulder stand, Sarvangasana and Halasana, are oftentimes done in tandem. And this is for good reason. Because in shoulder stand, you begin to lengthen the posterior chain of your upper body, which really extends from the top of the head right to your lower back. And by putting your neck in flexion, you start to liberate a lot of the tension that people hold in their spine, especially along the back of the spine. So after warming up in shoulder stand, when you come into this pose, into plow pose, now flexing at the hips and bringing your legs overhead, now you add the lengthening of the posterior chain of your lower body. So plow pose is one of the most phenomenal ways to get release, lengthening, stretching of the entire back of your body. And you can tell that my toes are curled under in this pose, which also helps to the freeing up of tension that so many of us have in the plantar fascia, which is the connective tissue on the soles of the feet. And again, this posture magnifies the response of the parasympathetic effect. The lessons of shoulder stand taken in a plow pose should still exhibit that you're pressing your elbows down into the blankets. You want to be able to keep the majority of your body weight off of your shoulders and keep it more towards the lower end of your upper arms or maybe even towards the forearms. And what I'm doing here is I'm pressing down into the bolster with my forearms and my wrists in order to take the weight off of my head. You can tell that my hips are not directly over the shoulders, and I'm doing this just as an illustration that you don't have to be vertical with the torso in order to achieve the benefits of the posture. Your pelvis can be back further away from the head. It doesn't have to be vertical. And now after 3 minutes in plow pose, you're going to start to bend your elbows, hold your pelvis or hold your back, or you can even hold the bolster, and just slowly let yourself back down onto the bolster. Bend your knees at about the halfway point until your feet come to be flat on the floor. And then use your legs to slide yourself back off of the shoulder stand, blanket stack, until your shoulder blades themselves are on the first blanket. Place your arms in a goalpost position. Close your eyes, bring your knees together, keep your feet wide, and this can be your Shavasana. Now for the propless version of shoulder stand, we will just be using a mat. So once you lay down, keeping yourself about the same distance from the wall as what you measured before for the prop version, you're going to press your hands into the mat, throw your legs and your pelvis up and overhead, either stop your feet on the wall or bring them to the floor as you again clasp your hands behind you and rock side to side to make sure that you narrow your shoulders before holding the back ribs and lifting back up. Now, the reason that I want to just show this other variation of shoulder stand is because we don't always have the luxury of carrying props around with us, especially all the props that it takes to do shoulder stand. So when you do this in classes, the most important thing to remember is what I said regarding weight distribution. So as you can see, my pelvis and my heels are not in a straight line to my shoulders. So you can let your pelvis drop back behind you in order to keep weight off the shoulders and allow more of them to land in the elbows. And as you come down into plow pose now, again, clasping your hands, interlacing your fingers, bringing your shoulders to be a little bit more narrow. You want to make sure that you, again, are not forcing too much pressure down into the shoulders and therefore the neck. So you keep your pelvis slightly away from the head. So the pelvis is closer to the hands than the head. And to come out, you hold the mat, bend your knees on the way down, and when you finally land, keep your knees and thighs together and your feet wide and rest.